The courtroom erupted in laughter as the judge humiliated her. Moments later, his arrogance shattered when he realized who he was truly up against. Before we dive into this incredible story, take a moment to engage. If you're excited to see justice served, comment 1 and hit that subscribe button. If you're curious about how this courtroom drama unfolds, smash that like button. Even if you think you know how it ends, trust me, you don't. Make sure to watch until the end. There's a shocking twist that will leave you speechless. Ready to see arrogance get its reckoning? Let's get started. Judge Samuel Thompson leaned back in his grand leather chair, a smug smile playing on his lips as he looked down at the elderly woman standing before him. The courtroom buzzed with muffled laughter as he tapped his gavel lightly, the sound echoing in the polished, marble-lined hall of the Charleston District Court. His eyes narrowed with disdain as he took in her simple gray suit, silver hair neatly tied in a bun, and veined hands resting calmly on the wooden table before her. "Ma'am," he drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "are you lost? This is a court of law, not a senior citizens bingo hall." The courtroom erupted into laughter, a mocking chorus from the young lawyers lining the front row. Even the bailiff had to stifle a chuckle, his shoulders shaking before he cleared his throat. But the woman did not flinch. Her name was Margaret Whitmore, and beneath her calm exterior burned a fire no one in that room could possibly imagine. Her steel gray eyes remained fixed on Judge Thompson, unblinking, unwavering. Her posture did not waver, nor did her face betray a single emotion. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Do you really think you can represent yourself? At your age? Do you even understand the charges?" His words were laced with condescension, his tone carrying the weight of superiority and mockery. The air in the courtroom grew tense, the laughter fading as people began to sense an unseen force emanating from Margaret. Her voice, steady and piercing, cut through the silence. "Your Honor, I strongly advise you to choose your words carefully." The room froze. Judge Thompson's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as the weight of her words settled like cold iron. He had just made a very, very big mistake. The laughter died abruptly, leaving a suffocating silence in the Charleston District Court. Judge Samuel Thompson's smug grin faltered, his fingers curling tightly around the gavel as he straightened in his seat. The confidence that had oozed from him moments before seemed to waver, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty as he met Margaret Whitmore's steely gaze. Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold, slicing through the arrogance that had blanketed the room. "Excuse me?" Judge Thompson's voice was tight, his amusement replaced with irritation. "Are you threatening me?" Margaret's expression remained unchanged, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. She took a deliberate step forward, her heels echoing on the marble floor, each step measured, controlled. Her posture was impeccable. Shoulders squared, chin high, every inch of her radiating authority that belied her age. "I am advising you, Your Honor," she said evenly, her voice echoing with a quiet power that demanded attention, "because underestimating me could be the most critical mistake you've made in your entire career." Gasps rippled through the courtroom, a wave of disbelief and intrigue sweeping across the faces of the spectators. The young lawyers who had been smirking earlier now shifted uncomfortably, their confidence crumbling under the weight of Margaret's words. Even the bailiff's face turned solemn, his eyes darting nervously between the judge and the woman who stood so fearlessly before him. Judge Thompson's face flushed red, anger flaring in his eyes. "You dare speak to me like that? In my courtroom?" he growled, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You are out of line." He slammed his gavel down, the loud crack failing to shake Margaret's composure. But Margaret merely folded her hands, her demeanor composed, almost serene. "Out of line?" she repeated softly, her voice dangerously calm. "Or are you simply not accustomed to someone challenging your authority?" The tension in the room was palpable. It coiled through the air like a live wire, setting every nerve on edge. Judge Thompson's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the gavel. He opened his mouth to retort but found himself at a loss for words, his mind grappling with the unfamiliar sensation of doubt. Margaret's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "I've faced far greater men than you, Your Honor," she said quietly, her words carrying the weight of history, of battles fought and won, and they too made the mistake of underestimating me. A chill ran through the courtroom. Margaret's eyes never wavered, never blinked, and in that moment, Judge Thompson knew. He wasn't just facing an elderly woman, he was standing before a legend, and she was just getting started. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent. Not a breath, not a whisper dared disturb the electrifying tension that hung heavy in the air. Judge Samuel Thompson's face contorted with fury, his authority under siege, his ego bruised. His fingers tightened around the gavel, the veins on his hands bulging, but he didn't strike it again. It was as if he were frozen, paralyzed by the icy gaze of Margaret Whitmore, the elderly woman he had so carelessly mocked. Margaret's eyes bore into him, unwavering, unyielding, and unapologetic. She stood tall and calm, every wrinkle on her face a testament to battles fought and won, every line etched with stories of victory and loss. Yet, she showed no fear, no hesitation. If anything, she seemed to grow stronger, feeding off the judge's simmering rage. Judge Thompson cleared his throat, forcing himself to speak, to reassert his crumbling dominance. You claim to be qualified to defend yourself? His voice wavered, cracking at the edges. He coughed to mask the tremor, but the damage was done. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Margaret's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a smile. It was a warning. Qualified? She repeated, her voice low and measured, each word deliberate. Your Honor, I did not come here seeking validation. I came here for justice. Her words cut through the air, slicing away the judge's remaining confidence. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, the young lawyers leaning forward, eyes wide with anticipation. They could feel it. Something monumental was about to happen, and they didn't want to miss a second of it. Judge Thompson scoffed, attempting to reclaim his authority. Justice? He mocked. Do you even understand the law, Mrs. Whitmore? Or are you just here to make a spectacle of yourself? Margaret took a slow, deliberate breath. Her shoulders were square, her head held high, and her eyes gleamed with a fire that made the room feel a few degrees colder. Understand the law? She echoed, her voice echoing off the polished walls. She reached into her leather briefcase, her movements methodical and confident. She pulled out a worn, yellowed document, her fingers steady as stone. She held it up, the paper trembling ever so slightly under the fluorescent lights. Your Honor, I don't just understand the law. I wrote it. Gasps erupted from the audience, a wave of shock and disbelief washing over the courtroom. Judge Thompson's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in stunned silence. He leaned forward, his gaze locked on the document, the words on the paper confirming his worst fear. Margaret continued, her voice steady and cold. 35 years ago, when I served as the chief zoning attorney of this city, I drafted the very exemption that is at the heart of this case. Her gaze pierced through him, unwavering. You are trying to interpret my words, Your Honor. I know exactly what they mean. The color drained from Judge Thompson's face. He blinked rapidly, his confidence shattered, his authority crumbling before the very person he had ridiculed. The courtroom was buzzing now, the young lawyers whispering furiously among themselves, their admiration and respect for Margaret unmistakable. But Margaret didn't acknowledge the commotion. She simply folded her hands, her posture regal and composed. This isn't just about a case, she said, her voice echoing with quiet fury. It's about teaching you a lesson in respect. Her eyes narrowed, her gaze unrelenting. Never judge a person by their age. You might just find yourself standing before a legend. Judge Thompson opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was trapped, outmatched, and outsmarted by the very woman he had tried to humiliate. And as he sat there, speechless and defeated, Margaret Whitmore stood tall, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than ever. Wow, did you see that power move? Margaret just turned the courtroom upside down. If you're as shocked as Judge Thompson, hit that like button. What do you think happens next? Will the judge find a way to fight back, or has Margaret completely outsmarted him? Comment your predictions below. If you're rooting for Margaret to deliver more courtroom shocks, make sure to subscribe. There's more drama to come, and trust me, the twists will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned, because the next part reveals a secret that could change everything. Don't miss it. The courtroom buzzed with shock and disbelief. Judge Samuel Thompson sat frozen, his face ashen, his authority shattered. The document Margaret Whitmore held gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a relic of her legendary past. A past he had been foolish enough to mock. His fingers clenched around the gavel, but the wooden handle felt cold and heavy, a useless symbol of power he no longer commanded. Margaret's eyes never left him, her expression icy and unyielding. She had taken control of his courtroom without raising her voice, without breaking a sweat. The air felt heavy, charged with tension, as the young lawyers who had laughed at her earlier now sat pale-faced, their eyes wide with awe. They were witnessing a masterclass in power and authority, a lesson they would never forget. Judge Thompson's throat bobbed as he swallowed, struggling to regain his composure. This is preposterous," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You expect me to believe that you wrote this exemption?" He pointed a trembling finger at the yellowed document in Margaret's hand. "This is nothing but a desperate attempt to confuse the court." Margaret's gaze hardened, her chin lifting ever so slightly. "Desperate?" she echoed, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Your Honor, the only desperation I see is yours, clinging to authority you no longer possess." A hush fell over the courtroom, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Judge Thompson's face flushed a deep red, anger flickering in his eyes. But beneath that anger was something far more dangerous. Fear. He was losing control, and he knew it. He slammed the gavel down, the sharp crack echoing off the walls. "Order!" he barked, his voice shaking. "I will not tolerate this insolence. I am the judge here, and you will show respect." But Margaret didn't flinch. Her shoulders remained square, her posture perfect, every line of her face composed and resolute. "Respect is earned, Your Honor," she said coldly, her words hitting him like a slap. "And you have done nothing today to deserve it." Judge Thompson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked around the room, desperate for support, but found none. Even the bailiff was avoiding his eyes, his loyalty shaken. Margaret's gaze swept the courtroom, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You mocked me for my age. You laughed at me because I don't fit your image of power," she said, her voice growing stronger, more commanding. "But power is not in appearances. It is in knowledge, in experience, and in integrity." She took a step closer to the bench, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "And today, I have more power than you ever will." Judge Thompson felt his world tilting, his confidence crumbling beneath the force of her words. You can't speak to me like that," he whispered, his voice weak, almost pleading. Margaret's expression softened, just for a moment. Then her gaze hardened again, her voice as cold as ice. "I speak the truth, Your Honor, and the truth does not care about your title." The gallery was silent, every eye glued to Margaret, every ear hanging on her every word. The young attorneys looked at her with newfound respect, their previous arrogance replaced with reverence. Judge Thompson's shoulders slumped, his face pale, his pride shattered. He looked down at his hands, his authority slipping away like sand through his fingers. Margaret turned, her chin high, her movements graceful as she walked back to her table. "This court may be yours," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "But today, the law is mine." Judge Thompson's fingers trembled on the gavel, his power gone, his courtroom no longer under his control. And as Margaret sat down, her back straight, her eyes blazing, it was clear to everyone present. She had already won. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent as James Calloway strode in, his presence electrifying the air. Judge Thompson's face turned pale, his authority crumbling before the man whose name once commanded power and fear. Calloway's gaze locked on Margaret Whitmore, a cold, calculating smile playing on his lips. Well, Margaret Whitmore," he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "I didn't expect to see you fighting battles in your old age. Shouldn't you be resting in some retirement home?" Margaret stood her ground, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "I'm right where I need to be," she replied coldly, exposing corruption, just like before. Calloway's smile vanished, his eyes hardening. "You made a mistake coming back," he hissed. "Last time you got lucky. This time I'll destroy you." Margaret's lips curled into a defiant smile. "You lost because you were corrupt. And no matter how much power you think you have, the truth will always be stronger." The tension was suffocating, the air thick with animosity. Calloway leaned in, his voice low and menacing. "This isn't over, Margaret. Not by a long shot." He turned sharply, his coat billowing as he strode out of the courtroom, his presence leaving a cold void. The room was silent, every eye fixed on Margaret, waiting for her reaction. Margaret exhaled, her fingers tightening around her briefcase. "Let him come," she whispered to herself. "I've defeated him before, and I'll do it again." The war had just begun, and Margaret Whitmore was ready. Margaret stood on the courthouse steps, her eyes fixed on the horizon as news cameras flashed around her. Headlines were already spreading like wildfire. "Corruption exposed. James Calloway arrested in scandal that shakes the city." The web of deceit he had spun for decades was unraveling, his power shattered, his influence destroyed. Daniel, her loyal assistant, stood beside her, his face pale with disbelief. "You did it," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "You brought him down." Again. Margaret's shoulders relaxed, her posture softening. "Justice doesn't end with one victory, Daniel. It's a battle you fight every day." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were distant, reflecting the weight of decades spent fighting a corrupt system. Daniel looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You're not done, are you?" Margaret smiled, a soft, knowing smile that carried the wisdom of 1,000 battles. "No, Daniel, not by a long shot." She turned toward the city, her gaze fierce and unyielding. "As long as there's injustice, I'll keep fighting." With her head held high, Margaret Whitmore walked down the courthouse steps, victorious yet vigilant. The legend was far from finished. In 2025, the battle for justice is fiercer than ever, where power isn't just about titles, but about truth and integrity. Margaret Whitmore's fight isn't merely against a man, it's against a system rigged to protect the powerful and silence the righteous. Her courage serves as a reminder that standing up for truth requires unwavering resolve, regardless of age or circumstance. In an era where deception thrives in the shadows, Margaret's defiance lights the way, inspiring us to question authority and demand accountability. Her legacy isn't just about winning a case, it's about changing the narrative of justice itself. Will Margaret's battle end here, or is this just the beginning of her crusade against corruption? What should her next move be as she faces a system more complex and ruthless than ever? Share your thoughts and show your support for Margaret Whitmore by leaving a comment. If you believe in the power of truth and justice, like and share this story. Let's stand with Margaret and fight for a world where integrity prevails. The war isn't over. Join the fight.